Behold, this Grendel build uses Spectra Rage with Spectra Siphon from Gara and the Helmet system to barf enemies back up inside of an area in which you will gain more energy if you kill them. I call it Barf Bag Grendel. And you can use a weapon to kill enemies inside the area and make sure you get tons of energy from them. In this video, I'm going to talk a lot about Grendel and this little playstyle that I've whipped up for him. I'm not going to show gameplay examples here. Instead, I'm going to do a live stream where I play all of the Grendel builds in my Grendel week of FrameWork, my build and synergy loadout series for Warframe. That stream is going to be in the description. Either I'll tell you when it's going to be, or there'll be a link to the archive so you can watch it after it's happened. If you'd like to see some gameplay examples, that's where you can do that. The build is pretty straightforward. Basic survivability package using health, since Grendel has such amazing base health, Arcane Guardian to supplement that armor a bit more, and then adaptation for another layer of damage reduction. Unranked because I don't have enough capacity, but this is more than enough. Grendel is very tanky, so you will be able to sustain enough hits to stack up the damage reduction. The great thing about adaptation is that if you're tanky anyway, then this should be just fine. You add another layer of damage reduction you would want in the first place, and then this will get you the rest of the way there. Not for nothing, I do think that the full Umbral set is a solid choice here. I don't want to commit an Umbral Forma, and I do think that having 2 layers of damage reduction makes more sense. It's not the same as having Umbral Fiber, but I do think that'd be nice here. I don't really see Grendel getting much done without a lot of strength, and surviving with health and armor is a very logical way to approach him. Spectrosiphon, this is the cornerstone of the idea behind the build. Again, Grendel is mostly providing value as a generalist. He's very tanky, can slurp a bunch of enemies up if they're spread out. Then this is kind of like an explosive weapon, would just kill them. This is like an adaptive radius explosive weapon, but you stomach them, which condemns them to death, but they're not technically dead yet. And then Nourished is just giving you damage buffs. You're getting Nourished Strike and then Nourished Energy, which is good with all these energy orbs. So Spectrosiphon is here to fuel that stuff. I think that's what Grendel is good at. I think that Regurgitate is only good against weaker enemies, and Pulverize has been voted off the island. And so Spectrosiphon is here to fuel that. Flow. So a lot of people put flow on loadouts as a way to get more energy. It does not give you more energy. It gives you a larger energy wallet. Having a larger wallet does not give you more money. However, this build makes a lot of money, I guess is how that works in that metaphor. And so you want to be able to carry it around. This build is making a lot of energy all at once in one spot. And so being able to move with that is really good. A lot of other builds make energy over time or regenerate energy, and so they don't need to be able to carry it all around at once. They can just be using it and then they'll fill up the energy they have. But for Grendel, I think that flow makes a lot of sense here. Energy conversion, a lot of the things that Grendel is any good at revolve around strength, and this is a way to get very free strength because we have so many energy orbs. Not for nothing, the way that I've been playing this loadout, generally I feel like I'm getting a lot of energy orbs all at once, and this doesn't stack or anything. You get one charge at a time, and then I use a bunch of abilities all at once. So this should probably be Transient Fortitude. I do want okay duration and efficiency. The efficiency is mostly for the startup cost. I don't want it to cost too much to start using Spectra Rage to get energy back. I tried this with Blind Rage. Kind of makes sense because Nourished Energy gives you more energy for strength, and you have bad efficiency, but that thing that gave you bad efficiency gives you more strength, which gives you more energy, right? Well, but then it means that you need upwards of 100 energy just to start getting a lot of energy, which I don't know. I don't think that's the greatest choice. I think having this have a somewhat lower energy cost is valuable. But anyway, that's why there's a little duration and efficiency. And then Cunning Drift, we're going to come back to this later. It's a little complicated. Corrosive Rejection is here largely as a concession to Regurgitate. In Grineer missions, you will be able to kill Grineer fodder enemies, most Grineer enemies, with Regurgitate shots, and you will have enemies in your stomach a lot of the time playing this. So I feel like that's kind of nice to have. At higher level missions, you can actually use this as a weapon if you want to do that. If you don't care about doing that, yeah, I don't know. Maybe something like Enemy Radar, who knows. One sort of funny thing about Enemy Radar with a loadout like this is you can't do stuff with this build unless you eat enemies. So finding enemies before your allies kill them is good if you want to play this build. However, this also helps your allies find the enemies. So are you really accomplishing much there? But anyway, so who knows? Finally, the loadout is finished off with Arcane Grace. If you don't have this, you could use Arcane Victory, which also regenerates health based on your max health. It's a % of your health. You just get a headshot to activate it, and it doesn't heal you for quite as much. It's a proactive version, essentially, of what Arcane Grace is doing, which is just healing you for a percent of your health. For Grendel, a percent of his health is a very large amount, so that's solid. Grendel is a warframe that is not bringing a ton to the table. This warframe mainly relies on you wanting to play him and you wanting a generalist. He's not really good at any specific thing. For my reckoning, I feel like it makes the most sense to use Grendel this way when you're facing a lot of staggered enemies. So you have a group of enemies, you could use an explosive weapon or some such to kill them. The Proboscis Cernos is an exceptional example of such a thing. But you could also slurp them up. And this makes for a good situation if the enemies are very staggered. So I'll spawn a bunch of enemies now. And what you're going to see is that if they're all over the place, they're all real spread out, right? I can't easily hit, I actually probably could hit all of these with my Proboscis Cernos, but in an exterminate mission or some such, you know, hijack, I don't know, they're spread out like that, and being able to move the cursor around and suck them in wherever they are can be valuable. And then you can puke them back out and gain a bunch of energy, which is kind of nice. Again, at the end of the day, are you accomplishing that much there? No, but I do think there are situations where you can leverage it to be an advantage, and that is the value proposition of playing Grendel in the first place. And then, yeah, Nourished Strike is nice. You get some extra toxin damage on your weapons. Go figure. But still, Warframe is not a game where it matters too much exactly how powerful or competitive a Warframe is. And so I don't think it's a huge deal that Grendel is not really, really strong. I think he's a generalist. You can decide, I'm just going into a mission, I'm going to pick this Warframe and play this Warframe. I don't think that Grendel is that interactive. The problem with Grendel to me is that there's a lot of complicated mechanics that don't lead to a lot of complicated gameplay, and the values on some of these abilities are just weak. It costs a lot of energy to maintain. We had to sacrifice one of the more unique but maybe not as powerful abilities just to get the energy to maintain these. And by the way, if you don't like this, you could substitute it with something like Dispensary and then Equilibrium instead of Spectra Siphon. That's fine. I did that before making this version of the build. I thought it was about the same. This is a thing that Grendel can uniquely do. But there is a problem with it, so let's get into that now. What are some things that this loadout is not doing so well? What can we add that will shore them up? We already talked about the weapon, so you do want a way to kill the enemies in your Spectrosiphon if they don't die from Regurgitate or from puking them up with Feast. Now, if they die from the upfront damage from Feast when they get barfed out, that doesn't seem to give you energy orbs from Spectrosiphon, so that's a problem. At higher levels, they won't. They'll die from the damage over time a lot of the time, but it depends on the level. Regurgitate works, so if they die from that at a lower level, inside the Spectrosiphon area, you'll get energy orbs. That's good, but not ideal. It's nice to have the option to do it a different way. So having an option beyond Feast or Regurgitate that kind of gets the happy medium depending on the level of the enemies, I think that's nice. Proboscis Cernos, it doesn't have to be this weapon, but it ticks a few boxes. You can put down your Spectrosiphon area, and this will group enemies toward it to make sure they're in it when they die. And it also makes sure that they die because it does pretty solid damage, right? The second problem for this loadout is the way that Spectra Rage works. This ability can be destroyed, and the way it gets destroyed is by enemies attacking each of the mirrors and doing enough damage to them. You can see damage, that damage value, that 800. So that's how much health each mirror has. And then the number of mirrors, that's based on range. So you kind of want a lot of range to make this have a lot of health. What you've seen in the past few minutes is that if you can keep the enemies distracted or stunned or downed or whatever, from puking them out, from using Proboscis Cernos, from whatever, you know, then they won't be able to attack the mirrors. But if there are other enemies nearby, they will destroy them. At higher levels, this is just going to die. So something that you could consider doing is adding Stretch. Now you have a lot more mirrors, so probably they won't die as easily, but in my experience, this can be uncomfortable at higher levels. I do think that this is, there's a cost to using Spectrosiphon. It's good if you can eat all the enemies nearby or you're not at a very high level, but if you want to play Grendel at a very, very high level, then I might consider Dispensary and Equilibrium. I just thought since that's good on pretty much every loadout, you might as well see this, which is often better in the context of this loadout, but will stop working if the enemies are too strong or you don't eat them all. Let's talk about getting the enemies dead more reliably and just some support. So that's going to be your companion. I chose a Panzerwolf here. I like this because if you're using an explosive weapon, you're not hitting a lot of times. The Proboscis Cernos actually is pretty good at stacking a lot of viral, but viral quills is nice to have. This is just a good overall bonus. I do have corrosive projection on already, so we are softening enemy armor a bit in the first place. Now, if you're using slash procs, then that's not accomplishing much. But if you were to use a weapon with upfront damage, then having innately a little bit less armor on the enemies and innately some viral stacks on the enemies, that's pretty good. That's nice. Grendel's stomach does decay enemy armor, so maybe it doesn't matter too much. But of course, Vulpaphilas are also nice because of their devolution. They're just very low maintenance. This is a very safe choice. Personally, I think that Beast Companions are a good choice here. You have a lot of health. Grendel has exceptional health, and even a little bit of healing tossed in. And you also don't really have anything you need for your focus, so you can just run Vazarin to revive them faster. At higher levels, that might be a bit of a pain, but I do think it's an interesting choice. So what other beast would we want to go for? So you could have backup energy with a Sahasa Kubro. So these guys don't do their dig precept very consistently if you're getting attacked or attacking. But maybe if you eat all the enemies and barf them off the side of the map, you'll get energy. It could be a nice backup. I think this has some reliability problems, but theoretically it's all right. Quick word for Hunter Recovery. If you use a Kubro, and Predicites count as Kubros too, you can use Mecha Overdrive to give your Kubro meaningful status output, and they do slash damage, so they will actually do a lot of damage to even very high level enemies. And if you're playing a Warframe with a gigantic health pool, that creates a buffer where you'll probably get healed. Your companion will probably, unreliably, but you'll be able to take damage, a lot of damage, without dying, and then wait, a few seconds. You're not urgently immediately dead by taking some damage because you have so much health, and then your companion will save you by using its attacks on enemies, some random enemy, and this will heal you for a ton of health. If they get a slash proc and then it crits for 10 times damage, then it doesn't always happen. But personally, I think Kubros are a good pick when you have a Warframe with a ton of health, mostly because of that. But yeah, I don't know about a Sahasa Kubro specifically. Something that comes to mind would be just a Brawler companion. So this is a Magi Predicite. These guys are just brawlers. They can charge into a group of enemies and do a radial blind, and then they have their own finisher attack. If you want a companion that just fights extra fighting, I think this is one of the better options. Hunter Recovery like before, Mecha Overdrive like before. Having 2 mods from the mecha set is a nice little bonus when it comes up. You're not going to play around this, but when your companion marks an enemy, we'll see if we can get an example, you'll get a little extra bonus. Maybe you mark an enemy and then you eat all those enemies, then you barf them back up, and then that enemy shares its toxin proc to a lot of other enemies. That could be good. So again, we'll stand around for just a second for an example. You just be fighting, you're standing around fighting, you're not deliberately waiting for it to use the mecha set. But as you can see, it actually killed a lot of the enemies by itself, just because it had a slash proc and it activated the mecha set. It will maul enemies to the ground, which is incredible. But yeah, again, not amazing, maybe not something to write home about, but it's an option if you wanted one. I think that a Kubro or a Kavat is a solid choice here, because you'll be giving them so much health. But again, at high levels, they might die a bit much. What else is there to say? I think for a melee, you're probably looking for a heavy attack weapon. I think if enemies are going to be in your stomach and then barfed back up and you want to make sure they die, you might prefer, rather than an explosive weapon at very close range, you might prefer a melee weapon, like a heavy attack, to quickly take care of them. You've seen me get staggered by this a few times, so that's an option. I thought about shotguns a little bit. I liked the idea of Corinth Prime on the loadout for whatever reason. The thing is, I was looking at the range, so shotguns have fall off. The fall-off range, where the weapon starts to do less than its full damage, with this amount of range is pretty much the same as the range in which you can eat enemies. In other words, if enemies are close enough that they take full damage from your shotgun, you could just eat them instead. So I'm not sure if that accomplishes anything. I like this weapon. I was just biased. I thought it looked cool on Grendel too. But I do think that an explosive weapon is a great option overall. You just might want something else that you'd use at a shorter range. Something that strikes my fancy is something like Machete Wraith. Why not this one? So machetes have a spin to win heavy attack. Here I have kind of a weird hybrid heavy attack build featuring condition overload, because it will hit 4 times and inflict pretty significant status. So I'll show you, if you swallow a bunch of enemies and then you spin to kill them, then it can be a pretty elegant little combo if you end up close to the enemies. So we eat them all, circle, barf them, And then take out the machete and... Okay, they all flew out. But anyway, if they were still inside of it, let's see, you regurgitate them manually. Then you get in there. You can woogity and maybe kill them in a convenient manner. Now, you're not seeing the energy orbs because I have a pet with a vacuum, or fetch, as the case may be. But we are getting a bunch of energy. As you're seeing, we're leaving these fights where we ate a bunch of enemies and used a bunch of abilities with high energy. So it is working. It's hard to see. We could take the companion off and you'd see a bunch of energy orbs. I think that's most of what there is to say here. A fun little way to play Grendel. Again, it's a little finicky. It's one of those loadouts where you're not being less efficient necessarily a lot of the time than you otherwise would be, but I do feel like I'm leaning into Spectra Rage and Spectra Siphon because if you want to play Grendel, you probably want something to do, you know? You probably wanted a more active generalist, and so you may not object to this combination. But again, something like Dispensary Equilibrium, or there are other generalists in the world. If this doesn't appeal to you, Inaros makes a lot of sense. Nidus makes a lot of sense. This is a Warframe that is interested in having some weird utility and the novelty of eating enemies, and sort of an adaptive way of grouping up, killing a crowd of enemies that's dispersed. That's kind of a unique thing, but overall, there's not a ton here. Again, and I haven't been focusing on Nourished Strike too much, but the thing about buffing toxin damage, toxin elemental damage onto your weapons, is that most weapons are already interested in having toxin damage. So sometimes, depending on the weapon, you can save a mod slot and add in some really useful augment, or maybe Prime Shred, or some other multiplier that would be really useful. It depends on the weapon. It's something to try if you want to enjoy playing with Grendel. Speaking of something to try, if you want to play Grendel, this fashion frame. Oh baby, where do we even begin? Folks, Grendel has like no cosmetics at the time of this recording, so I'm not sure what you expected. It was going to be something pretty out there, right? So the main idea here was to make Grendel look dignified. And I wanted something that made him look like a moon prince. So I used the Spore ephemera. This is a pretty interesting effect if you make it all black, but I chose to get this kind of moony looking glow, which I think looks rather nice. It looks sort of similar, that there, to the glow on this Syandana, which I thought fit rather well. He's very big. The other problem is the shoulders. So this is way more of an involved topic than you might think. Just the Fracta shoulder guards here. The problem with these is that if you aim down sights, Grendel's shoulders are really big. So if we get an actual gun, what you're going to notice is that you can't see. You mostly cannot see. So we'll take out the Tysis or whatever I picked up. Yeah, he's covering a third of the screen, and so having a shoulder armor that doesn't cover much of the screen, I know it seems silly, but I really did have a problem with this. I had early fashion frames that had much bigger shoulder pads here. It just doesn't work, I don't know. Why the Glut helmet here? Well, because with this Wukong Noble animation set, which I thought looked really cool with his belly and then the this chest piece, if you use the other helmet, it clips a lot. You see his chin is kind of shoved into the thing. This is less of a problem for me. If you don't look too much, you don't really notice it as much. I don't know, I think it's nice. And then the giant knee pads. I mean, Grendel's got a large model, okay? I thought if you're going to put armor pieces on, they got to be a bit big. That being said, the imperfection of this loadout is that the color tones on the Oskira leg plates here, these are a little lighter than everything else. If you look carefully, you can see the red is darker there, but then it's like too dark here, and the white is a bit too dark. Grendel has this weird sort of semi-metallic thing on his model. It's not absolutely perfect, but personally I like the way they look. I like how these little juddy spiky things look with his whatever this flesh piece is. I don't know. Personally, it appeals to me a lot. It's a bit much, but come on, you're playing Grendel. At the end of the day, you know, this is what you signed up for. That's how I feel. I think that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed Barf Bag Grendel, a delicious playstyle that allows you to eat your enemies and enjoy what there are for generalist benefits of playing Grendel, if that is something that you are interested in doing. And I want to give a special thank you to my Twitch audience. When I make these loadouts, I do it by doing a brainstorming stream on Twitch, and a lot of these ideas come from talking to all of them. The idea to barf enemies back up into Spectrosiphon was an idea from my Twitch chat. So while I'm curating these ideas, I would hate to give you the impression that I come up with every single idea individually. I absolutely don't. And so I want to thank them very much for their support and their boundless curiosity, dedication, and creativity. And I want to thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.